like your background today.
Oh, thank you.
Do you have some more to go with it?
That would be a good idea. I've got many backgrounds. It could be
Yeah, the dynamic ones. Oh, well, look at that.
Or
I thought the first graders were very creative. So last year, my youngest were taking online classes. It was just amazing to see the crazy backgrounds they had.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, many of them have their selfies as virtual background.
Uh-huh.
So they would just walk away for a snack and the teachers wouldn't even notice.
that's good.
Yeah, yeah, first graders, they had fun online.
Has anybody ever done that to you when you're teaching online?
I don't care. You know, if they're not learning, that's their problem.
Try to find a good one. Let's see if there's... Of course, we could get on the roller coaster.
Oh, wow.
It's kind of like you're on the roller coaster then. That's great.
Yeah, sure. This is the only roller coaster I can drink tea on.
So that means we'll have to get you one with skydiving and
Oh, that would be a good one.
ooh,
Yeah.
It looks real.
Oh.
It looks real, yeah.
Ah!
Ricky, you have to send me this one.
I like the way you can lean and so on, so it actually
So let me introduce our guest for today is Minyuan Zhao. Minyuan is, as many of you know, is an associate professor with tenure at the Washington University in St. Louis. She earned her PhD in economics and international business at NYU. She had previously served on the faculties of Wharton, University of Michigan, and University of Minnesota. She has plenty of industry experience in entrepreneurship policy and the automotive industry. She is clearly one of the leading mid-career scholars who works at the intersection of innovation, intellectual property, and multinational strategy. And more recently has started working on corporate philanthropy as another topic. She has made many contributions to our understanding about organization structure and innovation and the geography of organization structure and innovation. She's an expert on China. She serves as an associate editor for Strategic Management Journal and also has editorial board experience not only at SMJ, but also ASQ, Global Strategy Journal, Journal of International Business Studies and Organization Science. She has numerous publications, including, I believe, 4 in SMJ, 2 in Management Science, 4 in Journal of International Business Studies, and numerous others, and has accumulated over 2,000 Google Scholar citations. So please join me in welcoming Minyuan Zhao.
Thank you.
Okay.
This is a more complete list than I would assemble myself. Very impressive. Yeah.
So, Minyuan, so thank you very much for joining us today. If you've watched any of my interview videos on YouTube, then you know I love to start these interviews by asking the question of how you got to this career. What led you to become a strategy professor? I like to say that I've never known a 10-year-old who said, I want to be a strategy professor when I grow up. And I'm guessing that at the time when you were growing up in China, it was probably even less likely to hear there than it is here. So I assume that most people have an indirect pathway into this profession. So tell us, what was your pathway toward becoming a strategy professor?
So yeah, when I was 10, I thought I would go to a power plant because that's my dad's job, and that's the only job that can hand out ducks on Chinese New Year. Highly desired position. So I didn't think about any academic job until 22. The last year of my master's program in Shanghai. I had, as I mentioned, I had work experience with automotive industry. I was sure to go to Shanghai Auto after graduation. You know, my career path was set for me, and I was dared into taking a GMAT in the summer before graduation. There are very few students remaining on campus in the summer. Those who are preparing for a GRE or GMAT, or those with, excuse me, with part-time jobs. And I belong to the latter. So without anything better to do, I was dared into taking an exam. And I got such a high score that everyone told me it will be a waste if you don't apply.
Okay.
And so, so it was too late to get prepared, and I just got all these leftover documents. You may remember back in the day, you need to type on the typewriter to apply.
Yes.
Oh, as a Chinese, I didn't know what type means. So all my friends literally typed on application because the instruction says type your name, right? I'm serious about this. So I got all the leftover package from those who were serious about applying, and they didn't want to apply for example, NYU, because the application fee was $75 instead of $25 for Maryland. I still remember how I got the NYU package because the application fee is too high. And so it's purely by accident. I really didn't know much about a PhD, and economics sounds cool because, you know, back then Chinese economy was growing fast. There's a lot of mystery on, you know, how things work, right? So I was, oh, economics sounds good. So, so I arrived, and it was not what I thought.
So
Yeah.
tell us about what your experience was like in the PhD program at NYU.
Yeah, so the first year was really tough, language barriers, right? Not being able to, and most of my professors are either Korean or Italian. So, you know, not to mention my poor English with accent, it's even more difficult to understand. I got all the A's, but I don't understand why we do this. You know, I remember in macroeconomics classes, it's in international macro, it was a calibration paper about money supply, right? And it showed how the calibrated model fit into the actual money supply in South America. And I just raised my hand and was like, what if these guys just don't know what they're doing and made a mistake? And you came up with this, you know, why do we come up with such an elaborate model to fit the data without knowing what how they actually made the decision? And of course, that question was dismissed. But yeah, I did fine on the grades. I got all the A's. I got the scholarship and all that. I never fully figured out the motivation behind research, other than it's a test of. I just respected all my professors. I admire all their intelligence to come up with such elaborate and elegant, simple, elegant models, right? To explain the complex reality. That's a skill I wish I had, but it was not, you know, quite the inner fire, you know, in me. So, so in the third year, it's very late. I finished my second paper. I presented my calibrated the real business cycle model at the end of my third year, and I went back to China, and I was catching up with my friends. I just brought back so many interesting stories happening in multinational R&D labs in China. I chatted with my professors, colleagues, and so on, and they were like, "Oh, you look really excited about this, thinking about writing a paper." I was like, well, no, but these are not research, right? These are just stories, interesting stories. But who knew? I turned that into a dissertation like in a year, and made a radical change from macroeconomic modeling to strategy.
So what was it about that topic that captured your interest more than macroeconomics?
Well, one is I can see it. I can talk with people, I can see how decisions are made, right? And the second is it's not intuitive. So I thought, because even now, right, people thought, oh, China is a dangerous place, don't go there. But companies do go there. And so like the firm heterogeneity, what explains that when most companies stay away, some actually find it advantageous to go there. Right? And I remember at that time, we were in this little apartment in New York City, and my husband often likes Western movies. How Western movies are like, right? I never understand why anyone would watch more than one Western movie.
They're all
because they're all the same. They're all the same. It's about like a super strong cowboy, right? Somehow ventured from point A to point B without being killed. And one question that came to my mind when I talked with those people in R&D centers and see, how these companies work is, well, if you're the strongest cowboy out there, then what do you want? Do you want a level playing field, or do you want a tough terrain, right? And I think it's a tough terrain, because that kept all these naive competitors out of the way. Like, the environment is too dangerous for them to function. And if the locals cannot do R&D, if the naive multinationals cannot do it, and then the sophisticated ones can take advantage of the underpriced and underutilized human capital.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's the firm heterogeneity and the counterintuitive observations that to me is a lot more interesting. Yeah. And getting to know people. I think it's a personality thing, right? Getting to talk with people. That's
right.
That adds a lot of value, and I can feel the relevance of my work.
What were the biggest challenges that you faced in doing a dissertation on this topic?
One is obviously it's a big switch. I would never advise anyone to do that at the end of your third year, after the third year. To me, the part of that I didn't understand is I thought my idea was very clear. It's very simple, very clear. I was even worried it's too simple, right? It's a dangerous environment, but you come up with a scheme to overcome it. And the scheme is inside your company, right?
Right.
I was like, I even gave an example. The example is so clear. Microsoft had a whole team moved from Beijing to Seattle when the idea was closer to commercialization. It was like, how simple is that? You have a global network, right? You're able to move things around while others cannot. So you can survive the environment better than others. 3 sentences, that's not a dissertation. That's too simple, right? And yet when I presented the ideas, I remember at the beginning, I did the brown bag. And there were not many questions. And afterwards, I went knocked the doors into faculty offices asking for feedback. Well, to be very honest, we didn't know where you're getting at. We were like, what do you try to do? What's the research question? What do you mean, what's the research question? And my advisor, Bernie Young, said, well, you really need to work on simplifying the story because you have a complex project. Like, why? So I think a very important learning process is to think from others' perspective and learn how to present a story like others can get hold of. That was not intuitive. I was constantly worried about my story being too simple. And the constant feedback I got is like, it's too complex. you need to simplify it. Right?
Well, and I think there's a good lesson there in terms of, if you've got a good idea, it doesn't really matter how simple it is. It doesn't have to be complicated to be a contribution. In fact, many of the biggest and most important contributions are quite simple.
Right. No, but you asked me about the challenge, right? In
Right.
developing the idea, because it's hard to let go of the interesting details, right? Once you spend the whole summer in those labs and there are just, how Intel color code all the information and how like GM does not allow joint venture partners to participate in some training, but not the others. These are like really interesting details, but learning how to let go of the details, I think that's a challenge to make it very simple and abstract.
Very interesting. So tell us a little bit more about kind of how your research evolved after you finished your PhD and the research projects that followed. What led you to do the sequence of projects that you wound up doing?
It was not a good one. Not a good experience. So I don't know. I guess many of you are still PhD students, so you don't know how it's like to be done with the job market. I talked to some people and, the feeling was shared, right? By the time you're done with your job market, you're so tired of your job market paper. You're so eager to move on. And I remember my committee said, Minyuan, you need to get 3 papers out of your dissertation. I was like, I'm done with this. Don't want to say one more word about, arbitrage and IP. So I immediately moved on to technology clusters, which is, a close extension, right? If you think China is too risky for IP protection, Silicon Valley is equally risky, right? Because employees walk across the street to a competitor anytime.
Right.
So it's a very so Juan Ocasa and I, he was the first year assistant professor in Stern when I was graduating from there. So we connected in the 1-year overlap, and we started to write a series of papers about clusters. But the international IP part, I just put it aside. Those papers took a while to see the light of the day. And then, the department start to knock on you, right? Minyuan, you checked all the boxes, you're a good teacher, good colleague, but where are the numbers? We need a number to make a case for you. And it was almost all my projects require new data collection. It's slow, I knew I shouldn't do it, but sometimes we just don't do what we preach. And so, I was so eager to jump onto quote unquote quick projects. If a colleague is having an idea, a data set, a ready data set, right? And so like, Minyuan, do you want to work together? Like, sure, I need the numbers. My chair told me I need the numbers, and the number is the only thing I need now. So, so you quickly jump into those collaborations with ready data and so on, and you're so uninterested. Is that English word? Disinterested. Yes. Okay. And I remember walking to the office. I was like, today I need to work on this, but oh my God, I need to work on this. Oh my God, today I need to work on this. And he was just sitting there, and the motivation is not there. Quick projects turn into slow projects because the moment there's a hiccup, that means it's a bad idea. So the lack of faith in the idea, right, means you're basically delayed. I was delayed by any setback, because if there's a setback, I just sit on it for 4 weeks before I have the motivation to do it again. So that didn't go well. Like jumping into papers that are not even in my area, just because I was so eager to get the numbers.
Right.
Yeah, so that explained my second move.
So yeah, I mean, I think there's a good lesson there for the doctoral students and junior faculty to think about. You know, I mean, we are in a profession where we do have the luxury, if we grab it, to be able to just do the kind of work that we like to do, that we find intrinsically motivating and enjoyable to do. You know, but we do sometimes fall into this trap of you know, pursuing projects that are less motivating, and that can be quite demoralizing. I mean, I found that for myself. You know, at a certain point, I was like you said, so done with the dissertation, and yet continuing to work on trying to extract more and more papers out of it, and so unmotivated to do it. It just was painful, you know.
But if you only have 3 years left on your tenure clock, and a colleague said, I have a cleaned data, right? It's very tempting, but if it's not your area, it's not your area. I mean, yeah.
Either it's not in your area, or if it's something that you just are tired of, you know, it can be very unmotivating to continue to work on these projects. And you know, I think that was the darkest time for me in my career, where I just wanted to quit and just become a truck driver, you know, at a certain point. But yeah, I definitely, I feel for you. Right. So okay, so your research, like we said earlier, focuses kind of at the intersection of international strategy and innovation strategy. So, you know, and that is a very fertile area of research. A lot of people studying at that intersection. And so I wonder if you could maybe tell us a little bit about how you view kind of the current state of research in that area, and specifically, you know, what are the most important unanswered questions that we still, you know, don't have answers for at this point at that intersection of international strategy and innovation strategy? What do we not know about that topic that we really ought to know by now? What do you think?
Well, I think the biggest unknown, which it doesn't mean I encourage you guys to go for it, because it's going to be a challenge. And I, like Miles Shaver told me when I got my first job, right? If nobody is doing it, there's a reason for it. But you know, since the question is what's unknown, I would say it's the behavioral part of it. And I felt very strongly about it when working on the current project. So you will see that, you know, now I'm working on global litigation, right? Patent litigation. And I interviewed many IP managers, the law, prominent lawyers in law firms, right? And many was like, you know, they're so impressed by major events, statistics, right? So for example, Nevada's patent was denied in India. Oh my God, everyone was talking about this. You know, India does not respect intellectual property rights and all, you know, all this. And when Apple and Samsung had the epic battle, and Apple won this $1 billion, I don't remember thing, in California. I was like, oh, of course Apple win. Apple's from California. Of course there's home bias. And like, what do you mean? Of course there's home bias. So Apple is not allowed to win in California. You know, what
Samsung's not allowed to win there? Yeah.
Yeah. So what about intrinsic merit, right? Without any control for intrinsic merit or the case. And I was surprised, like professionals cite those events as evidence, and you know, of course they're not going to publish paper on it, but I have no doubt they affect their behavior, they affect their decisions. And because precise measurement is so hard to come by, You can say that's another unknown answer. So there are still people trying to understand the quality of patents, right? After so many years, they're still trying to understand the quality of patents. So without a precise measure, like what do we buy into? This is not my RA meeting in the morning. Not allowed to come in. So, how do we come up with a picture and decide what to do, right? There's a lot of faith. Those who believe China has made a tremendous progress in IP protection cite the fact that 80% of the multinationals win in the IP cases, right? I was like, well, it doesn't mean anything, by the way. 80% of the win, maybe 100% should win, and 80% may be the indication of bias. You never know. But those
Right.
who believe in the system cite 80%, right? Those who never trusted China, that camp was like, look how few Americans file any suits in China, and that's because that's a system never to be trusted. So you can always pick statistics and the simple statistics, and without precise measures of those things, I do think like behavioral issues are driving a lot of the decision making in this field, but it's very difficult to pinpoint.
Well, as you point out, there's a lot of decisions to be made in this field, right?
Yeah.
Do we file a patent or not?
Yeah.
Do we file a lawsuit or not? What scope of claims do we make on the patents that we do file? Where do we file patents? Which countries which products do we file, or technologies? Which technologies do we file patents on? So there's a lot of decisions that are made that are not even visible, right? Because you don't observe patents that don't get filed. It's
the unknowns, right? Or the litigation cases that are settled. And you don't know the client. Yeah, and the big elephant in the room is the government. The government decisions that are shaping it, and I like to say the so-called industrial policies and so on, they're really elephant in the room. They rarely punch anyone like by physically doing anything, right? But simply by knowing the government can do it if they want, you're right next to the elephant, right? Yes. You cannot see the whole picture of the elephant, but there's something gigantic next to you is going to affect a lot of decision making, rightly or wrongly. So the unobservables and the emotional, as well as very I wouldn't say individualistic, but I can see the big effect in individuals. Like those prominent law firms, they advise large multinational companies. There's reputation, like some law firms are more conservative than others. Well, we're talking about the people in there are more conservative than the leadership, right? But what's behind their mental model, right? What lead some law firms to be more optimistic about global patenting than others? That we don't know.
What can researchers do to overcome these barriers to observing these phenomena and understanding what's going on within the company, behind the scenes, within the manager's head, within the attorney's head? What can researchers actually do to get a clearer picture of what's happening here?
I don't know. I think one prominent field, subfield we're seeing are those very small proprietary data, like one company, right? Several branches, or one company, several partners. That the death of partner is another subsample of those, right? To show the individual effect. But the era in which you can put all the patterns in one file and then run a regression with it, that's gone.
Right.
And so, or using patent as a blanket proxy for innovation, that's gone. It still applies in some industries. It still applies in some areas. So depending on the research question, right? I'm not saying don't use patents. It's still an important source of information for some research topics and some areas, but those kind of, NVR data throw into the regression and see what comes out of it. That's gone.
Right. Yeah, that's already been done. And so we got to stop looking only under the street light, right? We got to maybe look in the darker corners and, maybe not only, drill into the narrow part of the wood, but try and drill into the thicker part of the wood and try to do the harder work. And even if that means small samples, even if that means, lack of, questions about generalizability, right? So good. Yeah, that's probably a very productive avenue for researchers to pursue in the future. So maybe tell us a little bit about any lessons you've learned through the course of your career that might benefit, more junior researchers or doctoral students.
Well, I thought I already shared my painful lessons.
Okay.
And the not so painful part is I still have a job, and that's so. One thing I learned is it's such a small world. So if you call that a lesson, right? At every juncture, you don't even know who's putting the words for you. That leads to the next opportunity. None of the moves were expected. Because someone said, hey, why don't you check out Minyuan? It's good. And I assume someone said I'm good, otherwise I wouldn't get the job, right? But you don't know whom, in hindsight, it was like some occasional encounter, or you did a review. I didn't even know that's a channel of information, right? One review I did really impressed the editor. And one discussion you did in a small conference, like big conferences, nobody listened to you, but in a small conference, you made a discussion, and it was like, oh, that discussant knows what she's talking about, right? And a PhD student you helped. So we're in such a small field that I think that's the positive lesson I learned. You never know when the next lifeboat is going to come along.
Good one. And corollary to that is the importance of giving proper effort to the service opportunities that you get, so that you have an opportunity to shine in those reviewing and discussant roles, so that people can notice you. Yeah. Very good point. So have you had much of a chance? I can't remember how many doctoral students you've been working with over the years. I think it said on
quite a few.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's the most important piece of advice that you give to your own doctoral students?
I would force them to know the context really, really well before they talk about statistics and anything. So yeah, I think almost all the doctoral students I work with, we have a co-authored paper, and I really force them to know the context. And that's a lesson I learned when I was a student. So my very first external seminar was given at Carnegie Mellon. And it was an invitation my advisor received. And he's like, later they said, Bernie, you're really pushing the envelope. He thought, since I have my paper developed, I thought it's my 4th year. It's time to show my face, right? Especially since I'm an econ PhD, he thinks it's important for me to meet the strategy people. So he flew with me and asked me to present my work. And I think I know every slide, but I don't know where the numbers come from. I don't know what it means. Like I have the statistics collected but the context, like the background information and the what ifs, it was a very humbling experience. And ever since that seminar, I swore to myself, if I'm going to talk about concept, I'm going to be the expert in it. Like I need to know the inside out and how things work. So a couple of years ago, we had a job candidate, talking about using data from FDA approval. Right. And I still remember like how awkward it becomes when all the questions about the process was unanswered. Like you cannot just download the data from FDA website and run without knowing how the decisions are made, how the committees are formed, and who are the stakeholders in those decisions, and all the background information. So that's because of my early day experience. I force all my doctoral students, it's not a waste of time to read extensively, to talk with people, to make sure you really know what you're talking about.
Right, so that you can answer those questions when they come up.
Right,
Confident.
and before you even come up with statistics, right? You know what those statistics mean.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Very good. Good. Well, thank you very much for joining our little celebrity talk show interview. I really appreciate you, sitting for the interview, and thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to be brutally honest.
Of course.
Yeah.